Roman Reigns joins CM Punk team for WarGames at WWE Survivor Series 2025. WWE just destroyed the most important character arc in modern wrestling history, and I am absolutely seething right now. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the man who spent years building an empire based on family loyalty and blood ties, the centerpiece of the greatest long-term storyline WWE has told in a decade, just announced he's joining CM Punk's team for WarGames at Survivor Series 2025, and this makes zero sense from a character perspective, zero sense from a storytelling perspective, and zero sense unless you understand the real reason this is happening. This isn't about good booking. This isn't about culminating storylines in a satisfying way. This is about WWE panicking because they're terrified their WarGames match won't be considered important enough, so they're throwing their two biggest stars together without any consideration for the fact that Roman and Punk have nothing in common, no shared history, no logical reason to be allies, and every reason to hate each other based on their respective characters. But here's what's going to make your blood absolutely boil: this team-up was forced through by management against the objections of both Roman Reigns and CM Punk, both of whom understood that this undermines everything their characters stand for. And when I reveal who made this decision and why they overruled the performers who actually understand these characters, you're going to see exactly how broken WWE's creative process has become. Let me paint the picture of this absolute train wreck of an announcement. Monday Night Raw is going along, and CM Punk comes out to address his WarGames team. Punk has been building this team for weeks, talking about finding warriors who share his vision, who aren't afraid to fight against the establishment, who represent what wrestling should be about. It's been compelling television because Punk's been selective, he's been strategic, and the team he's assembling has made sense based on his character and motivations. The crowd is invested, wondering who the final member will be. And then boom, Roman Reigns' music hits. The tribal chief walks out, and the place explodes because it's Roman Reigns, and people lose their minds whenever he appears. He gets in the ring, stares at Punk for what feels like an eternity, and then, they shake hands. Just like that. No explanation. No storyline justification. No acknowledgement that these two characters have completely contradictory philosophies and should want nothing to do with each other. They just shake hands, pose together, and we're supposed to accept that they're teammates now because WWE said so. It's lazy. It's insulting. And it's everything wrong with modern wrestling booking. Here's my first question, and I need you to be brutally honest: does Roman Reigns joining CM Punk's team make any sense based on their characters? Or is this just WWE putting their two biggest stars together because they think more stars equals better match? Sound off in the comments. Let's start with the most fundamental problem. Roman Reigns and CM Punk represent opposite philosophies. Roman's entire character for the past 4 years has been about family, about the bloodline, about blood being thicker than everything. He's the tribal chief whose power comes from his family connections and his ability to command loyalty through those bonds. His story has been about family betrayal, about keeping the bloodline together, about what happens when family members turn on each other. It's been intensely personal and specifically tied to his Samoan heritage and family legacy. CM Punk's character is about individualism, about fighting against authority, about earned respect rather than inherited status. Punk has spent his entire career, both in his previous WWE run and since his return, railing against nepotism, against people getting opportunities because of who they know rather than what they can do, against the idea that bloodlines and family connections should matter in professional wrestling. He's the anti-establishment rebel who thinks everyone should make it on their own merit. So please explain to me how these two characters would ever willingly work together? Roman represents everything Punk despises: inherited privilege, family-based power structures, the established order. Punk represents everything Roman would view as a threat: individualism over collective family strength, merit over legacy, rebellion against the tribal structure. They are fundamentally incompatible as characters, and WWE just threw them together anyway. Question for the longtime fans: can you think of any interaction between Roman and Punk over the years that would suggest they have mutual respect or any basis for an alliance? Because I'm drawing a complete blank here. Drop your memories in the comments. Now let's talk about what this does to Roman's character specifically, because this might be the most damaging part. Roman's entire arc since becoming the tribal chief has been about family. The bloodline story has been the backbone of WWE for years: the addition of Jey and Jimmy, bringing in Solo Sikoa, the betrayals, the power struggles, the family drama. It's been masterful storytelling specifically because it stayed focused on family dynamics and tribal hierarchy. Roman's power came from his family, his conflicts came from family, his character development came from navigating family relationships. So where's the bloodline in this WarGames team? Is Jey Uso on the team? Is Jimmy? Is Solo? Are any of Roman's family members involved? Because if not, then Roman is abandoning the core principle of his character: family first, always, to join a team led by someone who has nothing to do with his family and whose philosophy contradicts everything Roman stands for. That's not character evolution, that's character destruction. You're taking the foundation of Roman's character and throwing it away because you needed to fill a spot on Punk's team. And if some bloodline members are on the team, then why is Roman answering to CM Punk? Roman is the tribal chief. He doesn't follow, he leads. His entire character is about being the head of the table, the alpha, the one everyone else acknowledges. So why would he join Punk's team instead of forming his own team with the bloodline? The only answer is because WWE wanted Punk vs. the Vision to be the central story, and they needed star power on Punk's side, so they forced Roman into a supporting role in someone else's story. That diminishes Roman's character massively. Here's a characterization question: is Roman Reigns the type of character who would join someone else's team, or would he insist on leading his own team? Based on everything we know about the tribal chief, what makes more sense? Let me tell you what really happened backstage, and this is going to make you furious. According to multiple reliable sources, the original creative plan for WarGames did not include Roman on Punk's team. The writers had different teams mapped out that made logical sense based on existing storylines and character relationships. Roman was supposed to be involved in WarGames, but in a different capacity that actually served his character and the bloodline story. But approximately 2 weeks ago, someone very high up in WWE management, and I'm hearing it was someone with ultimate decision-making authority, looked at the planned WarGames teams and decided they weren't big enough. They wanted more star power. They wanted names that would impress Netflix executives and get mainstream media attention. So the directive came down: put Roman Reigns on CM Punk's team, because having those two names together will generate more buzz than whatever teams were originally planned. The writers pushed back. They explained that it made no sense for Roman's character. They pointed out that Roman and Punk have no established relationship or reason to trust each other. They noted that it undermines the bloodline story they've been building. All of those concerns were dismissed because the order came from the very top: Roman and Punk are teaming, make it work, figure out the justification later. Story be damned. Character consistency be damned. We need the marquee matchup for promotional materials. And here's the worst part: both Roman Reigns and CM Punk reportedly expressed concerns about this pairing. These are two veterans who understand their characters deeply, who have been in the business long enough to know when something doesn't work, and they both told management this was a bad idea. And management overruled them anyway because the business concerns outweighed the creative concerns. That's how you know WWE's priorities are completely backwards right now. Real talk question: whose opinion should matter more when it comes to character decisions, the executives who want marketable matchups, or the performers who actually understand and portray these characters? Who do you trust to make the right call? Let's discuss what this does to the bloodline storyline, because that's potentially the most frustrating casualty of this decision. The bloodline story has been WWE's most successful long-term narrative in years. It's created multiple stars. It's had genuine emotional moments. It's kept people invested through consistent character-driven storytelling. Solo Sikoa taking over the bloodline while Roman was gone was a fascinating development. Roman returning to reclaim his position as tribal chief was building toward an inevitable confrontation. There was story there was conflict there was a natural progression that people were excited to see play out. But now Roman is on CM Punk's team for WarGames, which means the bloodline story gets put on hold. Maybe Solo is on the opposite team and there's a confrontation there, but it's going to be one moment in a match with 10 people rather than the focused, personal story it deserves. Maybe the bloodline members are on Roman's team, but then we're supposed to believe they're just fine working alongside CM Punk and whoever else is on the team despite having no connection to them. Either way, the bloodline story gets diluted and complicated by forcing it into a structure that doesn't serve the narrative. WarGames is supposed to be about faction warfare, two groups with history and shared purpose going to war. The bloodline is a faction with history and shared purpose. They should be one of the WarGames teams. That's the natural fit. Roman leading his family against whoever opposes them, that's the story WarGames was designed to tell. But instead, WWE is breaking up the bloodline story to force Roman into a random team-up with CM Punk that serves no one's character and advances no one's story. Trivia time: the bloodline storyline began when Roman aligned with Paul Heyman and took on Jey Uso in a brutal I Quit match. Can you remember what year that match happened and what pay-per-view it was at? Test your bloodline knowledge. Now let's talk about CM Punk's side of this, because his character gets destroyed too. Punk's whole thing is that he doesn't need the establishment, doesn't need the company's chosen stars, doesn't need the big names. He believes in his vision and he assembles a team of people who share that vision: warriors, fighters, people who've been overlooked or disrespected. That's compelling. That's a clear character motivation that drives interesting team selection. So why would Punk want Roman Reigns on his team? Roman is the definition of the establishment in WWE. Roman is WWE's chosen one, the guy they've pushed harder than anyone for a decade, the corporate favorite who gets opportunities and treatment that no one else gets. Roman represents everything Punk has spent his career fighting against. Having Punk willingly team with Roman completely contradicts Punk's character and makes him look like a hypocrite who abandoned his principles the moment it was convenient. The only way this makes sense is if there's massive internal conflict on the team, if Punk and Roman are constantly at each other's throats even as reluctant allies, if the whole point is that this alliance is fragile and might explode at any moment. That could be interesting storytelling if WWE commits to it. But based on how they announced this, with a handshake and mutual respect, it seems like WWE is just glossing over the massive character contradictions and expecting us to accept that these two are totally cool working together now. And you know what's going to happen? Either the team dynamic will be ignored entirely and they'll just work together smoothly because the match requires it, or there will be some manufactured tension that gets resolved by the end of the match when they realize they respect each other after all. Either way, both characters become less interesting and less distinct because their sharp edges get sanded down to make the team up work. Question for everyone: would you rather see Punk and Roman as reluctant allies with constant tension, or as respectful partners who work together smoothly? Which is more interesting and which do you think WWE will actually do? Let's examine the other potential members of this team, because who else is on Punk's squad? We know Roman is now on it, but who else? Does it make sense for anyone to be on a team with both Punk and Roman given how different they are? You're basically asking wrestlers to choose between two philosophies that are completely opposite: Punk's anti-establishment individualism versus Roman's dynastic family empire. Most wrestlers would align more naturally with one or the other, not both. This creates weird dynamics for everyone else on the team. If you're a wrestler who respects Punk's philosophy, you probably don't respect Roman's methods. If you're loyal to Roman and the bloodline, you probably don't vibe with Punk's rebel attitude. So everyone on this team is going to have to compromise their character in some way to make this work, which means everyone comes out of this looking weaker and less defined than when they went in. Compare this to how WarGames should work: two factions with clear identities and shared values going to war. The Shield versus the Wyatt family. The Undisputed Era versus whoever opposed them. Those matches worked because the teams made sense. Everyone on each side had a reason to be there and a shared purpose. But Punk's team with Roman on it has no coherent identity. It's just the good guys or the people opposing the Vision without any deeper philosophical unity. And speaking of the Vision, who's on their side? Because if the Vision's team has better internal logic and chemistry than Punk/Roman's team, then you've accidentally made the heels more sympathetic because at least they have their act together and know what they stand for. Creative challenge: you assemble CM Punk's WarGames team in a way that makes sense for his character and creates interesting dynamics. Can you do it without including Roman Reigns? Try it in the comments. Here's what makes me absolutely livid about this decision: WWE had so many better options for how to use Roman at Survivor Series. Option 1: have the Bloodline be one of the WarGames teams, with Roman leading his family against an opponent faction. That's natural, it serves Roman's character, and it continues the Bloodline story. Option 2: have Roman in a separate match outside of WarGames, maybe defending a title or settling a personal rivalry. That keeps him featured prominently without forcing him into a team structure that doesn't fit. Option 3: have Roman be the opponent of Punk's team, leading the Vision or his own faction against them. That creates natural conflict and gives both men something to fight for. Any of those options would have been better storytelling than Roman joining Punk's team. But WWE went with the laziest possible choice: put the two biggest stars together because star power equals success. Logic be damned. It's the same thinking that led to Rock and Sock Connection and countless other random pairings that people remember fondly because of nostalgia but were actually just convenient partnerships with no real character foundation. And here's the thing: sometimes those random pairings do work and become beloved. Maybe Roman and Punk teaming will create cool moments that people enjoy. But enjoying something in the moment doesn't mean it's good long-term storytelling. It doesn't mean it serves the characters well. It doesn't mean it builds toward anything meaningful. Sometimes cool moments are just cool moments, fun to watch but ultimately disposable and forgotten once the next thing happens. WWE has become obsessed with creating moments at the expense of building stories. They want the Twitter clips, the YouTube highlights, the holy shit reactions. But they've forgotten that the best moments come out of well-built stories where the moment feels earned rather than manufactured. Roman joining Punk's team is a manufactured moment, shocking because we didn't see it coming, but not because it's the logical culmination of anything they've been building. Honest question: what matters more to you as a fan, shocking moments that don't necessarily make sense, or predictable moments that feel earned through good storytelling? Which creates more satisfaction? Let's talk about what happens after WarGames, because that's where this decision is going to create even more problems. Let's say Punk's team wins. Okay, so what happens to the Roman/Punk alliance? Do they just go their separate ways and never acknowledge this team up again? Do they become ongoing allies, which would require completely rewriting both characters? Do they turn on each other immediately, which would make their team up feel pointless? Every option has significant problems. Or let's say Punk's team loses. Then Roman took a loss in a team match with CM Punk, which diminishes the Tribal Chief's dominance. Roman has been booked as nearly unbeatable for years. Having him lose in a WarGames match undermines that aura, especially if he's not the one taking the pin and therefore has an excuse. And if he does take the pin, you've just had your most protected star lose clean to who? Who on the Vision's team is WWE willing to position as being able to beat Roman Reigns? This creates all kinds of booking problems. The smart booking would be for Roman to be the sole survivor on his team, standing tall even in defeat to protect his character. But if you're going to do that, why not just have him on the winning team? Or better yet, why put him in WarGames at all if you're so worried about protecting him that you have to do complicated booking gymnastics to keep him strong regardless of the match outcome? This is what happens when you book based on wanting specific matchups rather than natural story progression. You create situations where there's no good outcome because the premise was flawed from the beginning. Booking question: if you have to book the finish of this WarGames match with Roman on Punk's team, how do you end it in a way that protects everyone and leads to satisfying follow-up stories? Can you do it? Share your finish. Now let's address the Netflix factor again, because this is crucial for understanding why WWE made this decision. Raw moves to Netflix in January 2026, which is right after Survivor Series. WWE needs Survivor Series to be as big as possible to build momentum heading into that transition. They need mainstream media coverage. They need social media buzz. They need to prove to Netflix that WWE programming is worth the massive investment. So WWE is loading Survivor Series with as much star power as humanly possible. Roman Reigns on CM Punk's team. Brock Lesnar reportedly being involved somehow. Every big name they can get their hands on is being thrown into the Survivor Series mix. It's the Avengers approach: get all the biggest stars in one place regardless of whether they actually belong together, because the name value will generate attention. I understand the business logic. I really do. Survivor Series needs to be huge, and having Roman and Punk on the same team will definitely generate buzz and get people talking. But at what cost? At the cost of character consistency? At the cost of long-term storytelling? At the cost of the bloodline narrative they've been carefully building for years? Is one big Survivor Series moment worth sacrificing all of that? WWE seems to think the answer is yes. They're willing to compromise their storytelling for short-term business gains. And maybe that's the right call from a corporate standpoint: satisfy Netflix, pop a huge number, worry about the creative fallout later. But as someone who cares about wrestling as a storytelling medium and not just as a content delivery system, it's incredibly frustrating to watch. Netflix question: do you think Netflix executives actually care whether Roman and Punk teaming makes sense character-wise, or do they just see two big stars together and that's enough? What do you think drives these decisions? Let's discuss the locker room implications, because this matters more than people realize. Roman Reigns is arguably the most protected and privileged performer on the WWE roster. He has more say in his creative direction than almost anyone. He works a lighter schedule than most. He's paid significantly more. He's been the centerpiece of WWE programming for a decade, and now he's being inserted into CM Punk's WarGames team despite it making no sense for his character. What message does that send to everyone else in the locker room? It reinforces that the rules are different for Roman than for everyone else. It shows that Roman gets to be involved in the biggest matches regardless of whether his inclusion makes storyline sense. It demonstrates that WWE will bend reality and logic to ensure Roman is positioned prominently, even at the expense of other people's stories and characters. Some wrestlers will understand its business and accept it. Some will be privately frustrated but keep quiet. And some will look at this and think, I can work my entire career, develop my character carefully, build compelling storylines, and none of it matters because WWE will always prioritize their chosen few regardless of what serves the stories best. That's damaging for morale and for the creative culture of the company. And for CM Punk specifically, Punk returned to WWE after years away, and one of the implicit promises was that he'd have more creative input and respect this time around. But now he's being told Roman Reigns is joining your WarGames team. Figure out how to make it work regardless of whether it makes sense for the character and story he's been building. That has to be frustrating for someone like Punk who cares deeply about character consistency and storytelling logic. For any wrestlers watching or reading about this, how do you feel when storylines get changed to accommodate top stars in ways that don't make creative sense? Does it affect your investment in your own character work? Here's what should have happened if WWE actually cared about doing this right. If you absolutely must have Roman and Punk interact at Survivor Series, make them opponents. Have Roman lead the Bloodline team, have Punk lead his team of rebels and fighters, and have them face each other in WarGames with the added drama that these are two of WWE's biggest stars finally colliding in a definitive way. The philosophical clash between Punk's individualism and Roman's family-first mentality becomes the central tension of the match. That's compelling. That's something we haven't seen before. That serves both characters. Or if you want them on the same side of the broader conflict, have them lead separate teams that are both opposing the Vision or whatever the heel faction is. Punk's team enters from one side, Roman's team enters from the other, and they're reluctant temporary allies who never fully trust each other and might turn on each other at any moment. You get some of the big stars together energy without completely sacrificing character logic. But the absolute worst option, which is what WWE chose, is to just throw them together on the same team with no explanation, no character work to justify it, and hope people are so excited about seeing them together that they don't notice it makes no sense. That's disrespectful to the audience's intelligence and to the characters themselves. Final Fantasy booking: how would you incorporate both Roman Reigns and CM Punk into Survivor Series WarGames in a way that serves both characters and creates compelling storytelling? Give me your best pitch that's better than what WWE is doing. Here's the absolute bottom line. Roman Reigns joining CM Punk's team for WarGames at Survivor Series 2025 is character assassination disguised as Dream Team booking. It contradicts Roman's family-first tribal chief character. It undermines Punk's anti-establishment rebel character. It dilutes the Bloodline storyline that's been WWE's best long-term narrative. And it reveals that WWE is willing to sacrifice storytelling consistency for short-term star power marketing and Netflix-era business concerns. This wasn't a creative decision made because it's what's best for the characters or the story. This was a business decision made because someone in management wanted the biggest possible names together to generate mainstream buzz, and they didn't care that it makes no logical sense for these two characters to be allies. The writers objected. The performers expressed concerns. But none of that mattered because the directive came from the top and couldn't be questioned. Roman Reigns and CM Punk are two of the best performers in wrestling today. They deserve storylines that actually utilize their characters properly and build towards satisfying payoffs. The Bloodline story deserves to continue on its natural trajectory without being interrupted for a random WarGames team-up. And WWE's audience deserves storytelling that respects their intelligence and rewards their investment rather than just throwing stars together because it looks good on a poster. So yeah, Roman Reigns joined CM Punk's team for WarGames at Survivor Series 2025. The tribal chief and the voice of the voiceless, fighting side by side despite having literally nothing in common and every reason to distrust each other. That's your WWE in 2025, incredible talent, massive business opportunities, and a frustrating tendency to sacrifice long-term storytelling for short-term moments that pop a rating but don't build toward anything meaningful. And if you're not at least a little bit angry about watching years of careful character work get thrown away for a marketing stunt, then you're not paying attention to what actually makes wrestling storytelling compelling versus what just makes it commercially convenient.